open road can feel peaceful. Just you, the highway, and miles of quiet ahead. But if you've spent enough time out there, especially at night, you start to notice things that don't quite make sense. Shadows that move on their own. Rest stops that feel off. And sometimes, things you just can't explain. In tonight's video, I'll be sharing 5 true creepy encounters from truckers across America. These are real stories from folks who've spent their lives behind the wheel and ran into something they'll never forget. Also, you might notice I'm using a different voice for this video. I'd really appreciate your feedback in the comments. Let me know what you think. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps more than you know. Now buckle up. Let's get into it.
The sun was barely up, painting the horizon over El Paso, Texas, a faint orange as I climbed into the cab of my Freightliner Cascadia. It was October 17th, 2024, and I'd been hauling freight for 6 years, mostly cross-border runs between Juarez, Mexico, and the U.S. The route was routine: pick up a sealed container at the industrial park in Juarez, cross the Bridge of the Americas, and drop it at a warehouse in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. Easy money, or so I thought. That day, though, something felt off. Call it a gut instinct, honed by years of dodging sketchy cargo and shadier clients. I was 38, a single dad with a 10-year-old daughter, Mia, who lived with my sister in Las Cruces. Trucking was my way of keeping us afloat, but it came with risks, cartels, corrupt officials, and the occasional overzealous border patrol agent. I'd heard stories of drivers getting caught with contraband they didn't know was in their load, but I'd always been careful. My broker, a guy named Carlos who operated out of a dingy office in El Paso, swore this job was clean. "Just auto parts," he said, handing me the manifest. "Pick up at Planta Industrial Maquiladora, drop at Sunland Park Logistics." The Juarez pickup went smooth. The container, a standard 40-footer, was sealed with a heavy-duty lock when I hooked it to my rig. I checked the seal number against the paperwork, matched perfectly. The warehouse manager, a wiry guy with a mustache, barely looked at me as he signed off. "Vaya con Dios," he muttered, which I took as a half-hearted joke. I climbed back into the cab, cranked the AC, and headed for the border. The Bridge of the Americas was busy as usual. A line of trucks stretched back half a mile, engines idling in the heat. I sipped coffee from a thermos, scrolling through texts from Mia. She'd sent a photo of her science project, a model volcano with red food coloring for lava. "Dad, it erupted," the caption read. I smiled, typing a quick reply before inching forward in the queue. That's when I noticed the black SUV behind me. It wasn't a typical border runner's vehicle. No rust, no dents, just sleek and polished, with tinted windows. It stuck close, too close, weaving slightly, as if trying to get a better look at my rig. I figured it was just some impatient jerk, but it didn't sit right. I'd seen vehicles like that before, usually cartel types keeping tabs on their goods. I shook it off, focusing on the CBP booth ahead. At the inspection point, the Border Patrol agent, a stocky guy with a buzz cut, took my papers and scanned them with a handheld device. His name tag read Sergeant Delgado. He glanced at the container, then back at me. "Anything to declare?" he asked, his tone flat but his eyes sharp. "Just auto parts, like the manifest says," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He nodded, but instead of waving me through, he signaled for a secondary inspection. "Pull over to the left," he said, pointing to a concrete lot where 2 other trucks were already parked. My stomach tightened. Secondary inspections weren't rare, but they were never good news. I followed his directions, parking next to a beat-up Kenworth with Arizona plates. As I waited, I thought about my buddy Raul, another driver who'd gotten into a mess a year earlier. Raul was a good guy, always joking about retiring to a beach in Mazatlan. He'd been hauling a load of fruit from Nogales when CBP found 200 kilos of cocaine hidden in the crates. Raul swore he didn't know it was there, but the feds didn't care. He was still in a detention center in Tucson, fighting a 15-year sentence. His story was why I always double-checked my loads, but with a sealed container, there was only so much I could do. 2 agents approached, one carrying a German shepherd on a leash. The dog sniffed around the trailer, its nose twitching. I leaned against the cab, trying to look bored, but my heart was pounding. The black SUV was still there, parked just outside the inspection lot, its driver obscured by the tinted glass. I couldn't shake the feeling it was watching me. The dog stopped near the back of the container, sat down, and stared at the doors. That's a signal, every driver knows it. The agent with the dog looked at Delgado, who raised an eyebrow. "We got a hit," the agent said. Delgado turned to me, his face unreadable. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," he said. "We're opening the container." I wanted to protest, to say I didn't know anything, but I kept my mouth shut. Arguing with CBP was a one-way ticket to trouble. They escorted me to a holding area, a small room with a metal bench and a one-way mirror. Through the window, I could see them cutting the seal on the container with bolt cutters. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Mia again, asking when I'd be home. I didn't answer. Here's where the subsidiary story comes in, the one that had been eating at me for weeks and made this moment feel like a trap closing. About a month earlier, I'd done a run for a new client, a guy named Esteban who Carlos introduced me to. Esteban was slick, expensive suit, gold watch, the kind of guy who didn't belong in a trucker's world. The job was simple: pick up a container in Chihuahua City and drop it in El Paso. No questions asked, double the usual pay. I needed the money. Mia's school was pushing for a new laptop for her classes, so I took it. The Chihuahua run felt wrong from the start. The warehouse was in a rough part of the city, surrounded by chain-link fences and guarded by guys with AK-47s. The container was loaded in the dark, and Esteban was there, watching from a Mercedes. When I crossed the border, CBP waved me through without a glance, which was unusual. I dropped the load at a warehouse in Horizon City, and Esteban's guys were waiting. One of them, a kid with a scar on his cheek, slipped me an envelope with $5,000 in cash. "For your trouble," he said, smirking. I never told anyone about that run, not even Carlos. But afterward I started noticing things. A car following me home one night. Strange calls from block numbers, just static on the line. Once, when I was at a diner in Socorro, a guy sat at the counter, staring at me the whole time. I was starting to think I'd gotten tangled in something bigger than a one-off job, and now, sitting in that CBP holding room, it all came rushing back. Back to the present. Delgado and another agent, a woman with a ponytail, came into the room. "We found something," Delgado said, his voice low. "You want to explain why there's a false compartment in your container?" My mouth went dry. "I don't know anything about that," I said, and I meant it. "I just haul what I'm given." The container was sealed when I picked it up. The woman agent leaned forward. "We're not talking auto parts. There's 50 kilos of fentanyl in there, hidden behind a panel. Street values over $1 million. I felt like I'd been punched. Fentanyl. The kind of cargo that doesn't just get you jail time, it gets you enemies. I thought of Raul, of Mia, of the black SUV outside. "I didn't know," I said, my voice shaking. "I swear, I'm just the driver." Delgado studied me for a long moment. "Here's the deal," he said. "We believe you might not have known. But someone did. You're either a pawn or a liar, and we need to figure out which. You cooperate, maybe you walk. You don't, and you're looking at 20 years. They laid out their plan. They wanted me to make the drop as planned, act like nothing was wrong, and let them follow the container to whoever was waiting at Sunland Park Logistics. In exchange, they'd keep my name out of it. I didn't have a choice. If I refused, I'd be arrested, and Mia would grow up without a dad. They let me back to my truck, but not before planting a GPS tracker on the container. The black SUV was gone when I pulled out of the inspection lot, but I wasn't fooled. Whoever was behind this knew I'd been stopped. The drive to Santa Teresa was 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every car behind me looked suspicious, every glance in the rear view a potential threat. The warehouse at Sunland Park Logistics was a sprawling complex, all concrete and steel, with forklifts buzzing around like bees. I backed the trailer into a loading bay, my hands sweaty on the wheel. A guy in a reflective vest waved me in, but I noticed two other men standing near a black pickup watching me. One of them was the kid with the scar from the Chihuahua job. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't talk. Just drop and go." I deleted it, my heart racing. The CBP agents were out there somewhere, watching, but I couldn't see them. I unhitched the trailer, signed the paperwork, and got the hell out. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to my sister's place in Las Cruces, grabbed Mia, and told her we were taking a trip. I didn't know if the feds would keep their word, or if Esteban's people were already looking for me. All I knew was I was done. I quit trucking that day, sold my rig a week later, and moved us to Albuquerque, where I got a job driving a city bus. It pays less, but I sleep better. A month later, I saw a news article online. A bust at Sunland Park Logistics, 50 kilos of fentanyl seized, 3 arrests. The kid with the scar was one of them. No mention of me, thank God. But sometimes late at night, I still check the locks on my doors, wondering if Esteban's out there waiting. I'm hauling a load of canned goods from Salt Lake City to Sacramento, running US 50 through central Nevada, the loneliest road in America. My rig, a beat-up 2018 Freightliner Cascadia, rumbles along, the CB radio spitting static. I'm 3 hours past Austin, Nevada, with nothing but sagebrush and the Toiyabe Range under a blood-orange sunset. No bars on my phone, no other trucks for miles. Just me, the road, and a thermos of stale coffee. I'm used to long hauls, the kind that blur days into nights. Been driving for 15 years, seen my share of weird, hitchhikers who vanish, lights in the desert that don't belong. But nothing like what I saw that night near mile marker 92. A kid, maybe 12, steps onto the shoulder, waving his arms like he's trying to flag down a chopper. He's scrawn, wearing a faded red hoodie and baggy jeans, pale as a ghost in the dying light. His eyes are wide, panicked. I ease off the throttle, downshifting, the air brakes hissing as I pull the rig over, gravel crunching under the tires. My gut's screaming trouble. Kids don't just pop up out here, middle of nowhere, no car, no nothing. I crank down the passenger window, keeping the engine idling. Hey kid, you alright? I call, my voice rough from too many cigarettes. He's hurt, the kid says, high-pitched, shaky. My dad. He's hurt bad. You gotta help. I scan the road, forward, back. No skid marks, no crumpled guardrail, no glint of a wrecked car in the scrub. Where's your truck or whatever? Off the road, he says, pointing to a dry wash running beside the highway. We crashed. Please hurry. I've heard the stories, scams on lonely stretches, guys pretending to need help to jack your load or worse. But this is a kid, and he looks scared shitless. I can't just peel out and leave him. I grab my mag light from the cab, a heavy bastard that doubles as a club, and step out, locking the rig. The air's cool, smelling of sage and diesel. Show me, I say, keeping my distance. The kid nods and scrambles toward the wash. I follow, boots crunching, flashlight beam cutting through the dusk. The wash is shallow, maybe 10 feet wide, with steep dirt banks. I sweep the light around, no tire tracks, no busted fender, nothing. My neck hairs prick up. Where's the wreck, kid? I growl, tightening my grip on the mag light. Down there, he says, pointing deeper into the wash. His voice drops, barely a whisper. Just a bit further. I stop cold. No way a car got down here without leaving a trace. This ain't adding up. Kid, I ain't moving till you tell me what's really going on. He turns, and I swear his eyes ain't right. Too big, too black, like they're eating the light. Please, he says, but it sounds off like he's reading a script. My dad's dying. I take a step back, heart jackhammering. I'm heading back to the rig. I'll call for help when I get a signal. No, he yells, lunging at me. I stumble, nearly eating dirt, and haul ass up the bank, my bad knee screaming. I don't look back till I'm at the truck, fumbling the keys. The kid's gone. Vanished. No tracks, no sound, just the wind hissing through the sage. I climb in, lock the doors, and gun it, the rig roaring back onto US 50. My hands shake on the wheel, the CB still spitting static. I keep checking the mirrors, expecting those eyes staring back from the sleeper cab. 20 miles later, I roll into Eureka, Nevada, a one-pump town with a diner straight out of the 70s. I need to piss and think, so I park at the gas station. Inside, the clerk, Doris, an old gal with a face like weathered leather, clocks my rattled look. You okay, driver? She asks, wiping the counter. I spill the story, the kid, the empty wash, how he blinked out of existence. I brace for her to call me nuts, but her face goes tight. Near mile marker 92, she says, sharp. Yeah, I say, thrown she nailed the spot. She leans in, voice low. You ain't the first. That boy's been showing up for years. Always the same, says his dad's hurt, lures folks off the road. No car, no wreck. Never is. My skin crawls. What the hell is he? Doris shrugs, but her eyes are spooked. Some say he's a ghost, tied to a wreck from the 80s. Others reckon he's something worse, something that feeds on folks out there. You're lucky you didn't follow him. I grab a coffee I don't touch and sit in the cab, replaying it all. Doris's words stick, but they remind me of a story I heard at a truck stop in Fallon a few years back, one that's gnawing at me now. The subsidiary story, the lost convoy of 83. It was 2019, at the Pilot Travel Center off I-80 in Fallon. I was grabbing a burger when an old driver, Gus, a grizzled vet with a 1,000-yard stare, started talking about a run he'd made in 83. He'd been part of a small convoy, 3 rigs, hauling produce through Nevada on US 50. Near Austin, they picked up a weak CB signal, a kid's voice begging for help, saying his family's car had gone off the road. Gus's buddy, a rookie named Tommy, wanted to stop, but Gus and the other driver, spooked by the kid's voice cutting through the static, voted to keep rolling. They made it to Eureka, but Tommy wouldn't let it go. Against Gus's advice, he doubled back alone. Tommy never came back. His rig was found a week later, parked neat as you please near mile marker 92, keys in the ignition, load untouched. No sign of Tommy, no tracks, nothing. Search teams combed the desert, zip. Gus swore the kid's voice on the CB wasn't human, said it had a hum to it, like a machine trying to sound alive. Something's out there, Gus told me, his hands shaking around his coffee mug. It don't just take you, it keeps you. I'd written it off as road lore, the kind of yarn old-timers spin to mess with you. But now, sitting in my rig in Eureka, Gus's story feels like a warning I should have heeded. That kid I saw was about 12, same as the one in Gus's tale. The red hoodie, the plea, it's too close. I roll out of Eureka, the highway black as pitch. My headlights carve through the dark, but I can't shake the kid's face. I crank the CB, hoping for chatter, anything to drown out the quiet. Static. Always static. By the time I hit firmly where I'm bedding down, I'm wired, eyes burning. I check into a Super 8 and fire up my laptop, digging into whatever I can find. Old articles on missing persons along US 50 are thin, but I pull a 1983 piece from the Reno Gazette-Journal about a family, John, Ellen, and their kid Timmy Harper, 12, who vanished after stopping in Austin. No car, no bodies, nothing. A trucker reported seeing a boy waving for help near mile marker 92 that night, but didn't stop. My coffee goes cold. Then I find a 2018 post on a trucker forum, buried in a thread about road ghosts. A driver out of Reno says he saw a kid in a red hoodie on US 50 in 2016. Same story, dad's hurt, follow me. He went a ways into the wash, but his GPS fritzed, and he got turned around, felt like the desert was closing in. He barely made it back to his rig. When he checked his dashcam, the footage showed nothing. No kid, just him walking alone. He quit driving after that. The pieces fit too tight, the Harpers, Gus's convoy, the forum post. This ain't just a ghost. It's something older, something the desert's been hiding since before the highways were paved. Gus's words echo, it don't just take you, it keeps you. Next morning, I'm back on the road, Sacramento bound. The sun's up, but it don't help. I keep the CB on, scanning channels, half hoping that kid's voice will come through, half praying it won't. At a rest stop in Lovelock, I jot it all down in my logbook, not the official one, the one I keep for the weird shit. The black dog on I-94, the girl on I-10, now this kid. I don't know why I write it, maybe to prove it's real. I call my buddy Ray, a driver out of Elko, and tell him everything. He's quiet a beat, then says, "You got lucky, man. Most folks who follow that kid don't roll out." I finish the run, drop the load, and head home to Reno. But the kid's eyes are still with me, burned in deep. I don't take US 50 no more, not at night. I stick to I-80 where there's traffic, lights, life. Still, when I'm alone in the cab, I hear that voice, "Please. My dad's dying." And I know somewhere out there, that kid's still waiting, waving down the next rig that comes along. The I-90 outside Chicago was a beast at 2:17 a.m., a stretch of asphalt that felt like it could swallow you whole if you let your guard down. I was hauling a load of auto parts in my Freightliner, bound for a depot in Gary, Indiana. The cab's heater cranked against the late April chill. The air was thick with diesel fumes and the hum of my rig, the only company I had besides the CB radio crackling with static. My thermos of black coffee was half empty, and I was running on fumes myself after a long haul from Milwaukee. Earlier that night, I'd stopped at the Belvedere Oasis, a truck stop just off the I-90, where I'd heard a story from another driver, Carl, that had my nerves jangling like loose chains. Carl was an old-timer, the kind of guy who'd seen every mile marker in the lower 48. We'd been grabbing a burger at the 24-hour diner, the neon glow of the sign casting shadows on his weathered face. He'd leaned in close, his voice low, and told me about a run he'd made a year back on this same stretch of the I-90. Picked up a hitchhiker near Harlem Avenue, he said, his eyes darting to the window like he expected someone to be watching. Guy was covered in blood, hands red as hell. Said he'd been in a wreck, but his story didn't add up. Dropped him at a gas station, but when I checked my cab later, there was a bloody handprint on the passenger door. Cops never found him. Carl's story had stuck with me, a nagging itch I couldn't scratch, and now, with the I-90 stretching out under my headlights, it felt like every shadow was hiding something. I was just past the Cumberland Avenue exit, the city's skyline a faint glow in my rearview when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe a blown tire on the shoulder. But then my high beams caught him, a man stumbling along the gravel, his dark jacket torn and flapping like a busted tarp. His hands were slick, gleaming red in the light, and my gut twisted. Blood. No mistaking it. I eased off the throttle, the rig's engine grumbling as I slowed to 40, keeping a good 100 feet between us. My CB was quiet, no chatter to drown out the thud of my pulse. He turned, and his eyes hit me like a spotlight, wild and glassy, locking onto my cab. His face was pale, streaked with dirt or maybe more blood, and he raised one hand, not waving but reaching, like he could grab my rig from the shoulder. Then he started moving toward the highway, his steps jerky, one leg dragging like it was half broke. Carl's story screamed in my head, hands red as hell. I flicked my eyes to the side mirror, expecting to see a car wreck or a posse chasing him, but the I-90 was dead empty, just me and this guy. I should have kept rolling. 18 wheels don't stop for trouble, not out here. But he was close now, maybe 50 feet, and I could see his mouth moving, shouting something I couldn't hear over the rumble of my engine. Against every instinct, I cracked the passenger window, just enough to catch his voice. "Help," he croaked, the word raw and desperate. "They're coming. Get me out of here." His voice was like gravel, and he kept glancing back, like he expected something to lunge out of the dark. "Who's coming?" I yelled, my hand hovering over the gearshift, ready to haul ass. The cab felt too small, the air heavy with the smell of oil and sweat. He didn't answer, just kept staggering closer, his bloody hands smearing the guardrail as he braced himself. Then I saw it, a flash of metal in his left hand. A knife? A wrench? My brain was screaming danger, and Carl's story was all I could think about. That handprint. That missing hitchhiker. "No chance, buddy," I shouted, slamming the window shut. I dropped the clutch and gunned it, the rig roaring as I pulled back into the right lane. But then thud. A heavy, sickening bang against the passenger door. I jerked my head, and there he was, right at the cab, his bloody hands clawing at the handle, pounding the glass with fists that left red streaks. His face was inches from the window, eyes wide, teeth bared, shouting something I couldn't make out. The door was locked, but the sound of his hands hammering my rig was like a sledgehammer in the quiet. I floored it, the Freightliner lurching as I hit 60, tires humming on the asphalt. My hands were shaking, gripping the wheel like it was my lifeline. In the side mirror, I saw him stumble back to the shoulder, his figure shrinking but still moving, arms raised like he could chase down a 40-ton rig. I didn't breathe easy until I passed the O'Hare exit, the glow of the airport a faint comfort in the distance. I had a drop-off in Gary, and the whole way there, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see that guy sprinting up the I-90, his hands dripping red. The receiver at the depot, a grizzled guy named Joe, noticed I was off. "You look like you seen a ghost," he said, signing off on the manifest. I didn't tell him about the man, but Carl's story was burning a hole in my skull. When I finally parked at a pilot truck stop on Calumet Avenue, I sat in my cab for a good half hour, replaying it all. Had he been in a crash? Running from someone? Or was he the one to run from? Carl's hitchhiker, the bloody handprint. It was too close to be coincidence. The next morning, I was fueling up at a BP on Indianapolis Boulevard when I heard it on the radio. A news clip about a body found on the I-90, right near Harlem Avenue. Male, 30s, stabbed up bad. No suspects, no witnesses. The reporter mentioned strange cuts on the guy's hands, but they didn't say more. My coffee went cold in my hand. I tried to tell myself it wasn't him, that it couldn't be. But when I climbed back into my rig to check the cab, I found something that made my blood run cold. A single glove, wedged under the passenger seat, stiff with dried blood. I didn't drive the I-90 for months after that. Took a job running loads down I-55 instead, sticking to daylight hauls. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the cab, the CB crackling with nothing but static, I think about Carl's story. About that glove. About those eyes in my headlights. Chicago's got its ghosts, and some of them are still out there, running along the shoulder, hands red as hell. I've been a long-haul trucker for 20 years, hauling freight from coast to coast, and I've seen my share of strange things. Shadows darting across empty highways, voices crackling through CB radios with no one on the other end. But nothing compares to what happened last month on a lonely stretch of Route 50 in Nevada, near that abandoned way station just past Austin. My dash cam caught something I can't explain, and every time I replay the footage, my blood runs cold. It was around 2 a.m., the kind of hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I was hauling a load of produce from Reno to Denver, the cab of my Peterbilt humming along, Johnny Cash low on the radio. The sky was clear, stars sharp as needles, and the road was empty for miles. I'd driven this route 100 times, so I knew the way station was coming up, a crumbling relic from the 70s, shuttered for decades, its windows boarded, scales rusted over. Truckers called it the ghost stop. Some swore they'd seen lights flickering in the windows or heard whispers on the wind. I always chalked it up to road fatigue and too much coffee. As I approached, my headlights swept across the station's sagging roof and the faded closed sign swinging on a chain. The place looked dead as ever, but something felt off. The air in the cab got heavy, like a storm was brewing, though the sky was still clear. My dash cam, always rolling, blinked its little red light. I ignored the unease and kept driving, figuring I'd stop for a nap at the next rest area. Then I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder, maybe 100 yards past the way station, lit up by my high beams. A woman young, maybe mid-20s, in a white dress that looked too thin for the desert chill. Her hair was dark, hanging limp over her face, and she stood motionless, head tilted like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. My first thought was a hitchhiker, but out here? Miles from anywhere? No car, no bag, just her in that dress flapping in the breeze. I slowed down, heart thumping. Part of me wanted to stop, maybe she was in trouble, but every instinct screamed to keep going. I've heard too many stories about women on the side of the road who aren't what they seem. I eased off the gas, though, just enough to get a better look. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even glance at the truck. Just stood there, staring at the ground. I grabbed my CB mic. Breaker, this is Big Red on Route 50 eastbound, mile marker 143. Anyone see a lady out here? Looks like she needs help. Static hissed back. No answer. I tried again, but the radio stayed dead. That's when I noticed the dash cam light flickering, like it was struggling to stay on. I passed her at a crawl, maybe 20 miles per hour, and as my cab drew level, she lifted her head. I swear my heart stopped. Her face, God, her face was wrong. Her eyes were too big, too dark, like holes punched in a sheet of paper. Her mouth stretched into a smile that was too wide, showing teeth that glinted like they were wet. She didn't blink, just stared right into the cab, right at me. I floored it, the engine roaring as I peeled away. In the side mirror, I saw her turn, slow and deliberate, watching me go. Then she stepped off the shoulder and into the dark. I didn't breathe easy until the way station was a speck in my rear view. My hands shook so bad I could barely grip the wheel. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a desert mirage, anything to calm my nerves. But I couldn't shake the image of her face. I kept driving, eyes locked on the road, afraid to look at the mirrors in case she was somehow keeping pace. About an hour later, I pulled into a rest stop near Ely. The lot was empty except for a couple of rigs idling in the corner. I parked, grabbed a coffee from my thermos, and sat there, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. That's when I remembered the dash cam. If it caught her, maybe I'd have proof, or at least something to show I wasn't losing it. I rewound the footage, the little screen glowing in the dark cab. The timestamp showed 2:03 a.m. when the way station came into view. Everything looked normal at first, the empty lot, the chain sign. Then the camera panned to the shoulder, and there she was. The footage was grainy, but it was her, standing like a statue, dress fluttering. My stomach twisted as the truck got closer. The camera caught her face when she looked up, and it was worse than I remembered. Those eyes, black as oil, seemed to swallow the light. Her smile stretched wider than any human mouth could, and her teeth sharp, jagged, like they belonged to something that hunted in deep water. But that wasn't the worst part. As the truck passed, the footage glitched, static tearing across the screen. When it cleared, she was gone. Not walking away, not stepping into the dark, just gone. The shoulder was empty, the road stretching on like she'd never been there. I rewound and played it again, frame by frame. 1 second she was there, the next, nothing. Except in the last frame before she vanished, something else showed up. A shadow, tall and thin, stretched across the road behind her, like it was cast by someone, or something, standing just out of frame. But there was no one else there. No other lights, no other vehicles. Just her, and that shadow. I didn't sleep that night. I locked the cab, kept the lights on, and waited for dawn. When I hit the road again, I took a different route, adding hours to my trip just to avoid that stretch of 50. Back at the depot, I showed the footage to a couple of drivers. One laughed it off, said it was a prank or a bad edit. The other, an old-timer named Hank, went pale. He'd heard stories about the ghost stop, about a woman who'd died out there decades ago, hitchhiking after her car broke down. They never found her body, but truckers still saw her, always at night, always near the way station. Hank said she wasn't alone, that something else was with her, something older, hungrier. I don't know what I believe. I've tried deleting the footage, but every time I plug in the cam, it's still there like it's burned into the memory. I don't drive Route 50 anymore. I stick to interstates, bright lights, and crowded roads. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the cab at night, I feel it, that heaviness, like the air's turning sour. I check the mirrors, half expecting to see her in the distance, standing on the shoulder, smiling that awful smile. And I wonder if she's still out there, waiting for the next trucker to pass by the ghost stop, her shadow trailing just behind. The night was heavy, the kind of dark that swallows headlights whole. I'd parked my rig behind a rundown truck stop off Highway 93, a speck in the Montana nowhere, where the only sounds were the wind and the occasional hum of a passing semi. My name's Cal, and I've been hauling freight for 20 years, long enough to know better than to park in a place like this. But I was bone tired, my logbook was screaming for a break, and the lot was empty except for a couple of rusted pickups. The trailer was loaded with machine parts, nothing fancy, nothing worth stealing. I figured I'd catch a few hours of sleep and roll out at dawn. I locked the cab, checked the trailer doors, secure as always, and climbed into the sleeper berth. The air was stale, but the hum of the engine cooling down was a lullaby. I was out in minutes. Then came the knocking. It started soft, a faint tap-tap-tap from the trailer, like someone rapping knuckles on metal. I jolted upright, heart kicking. The clock read 2:17 a.m. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. Just the wind. I told myself it was the load shifting, maybe a loose pallet. But then it came again, louder, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, like someone, or something, wanted my attention. I grabbed my flashlight and a crowbar from under the seat. The lot was dead quiet, the truck stop's neon sign flickering in the distance. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and scanned the trailer. The padlock was untouched, the doors still sealed. I pressed my ear to the cold metal. Silence. I almost laughed it off. 20 years on the road, and I'm jumping at shadows? But as I turned back, it hit again. Tap, tap, tap. Clear as day from inside. I froze. My load was machine parts, gears, rods, nothing that moves or knocks. I yanked the padlock, half expecting it to be jammed, but it clicked open. The doors creaked as I pulled them wide. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dark, illuminating stacks of crates strapped tight. Nothing out of place. No one inside. But the air felt wrong, heavy, like it was pressing back against me. I slammed the doors shut, relocked them, and climbed back into the cab, pulse hammering. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I hit the road, checking my mirrors like a rookie. The knocking didn't come again, but it stayed with me, a splinter in my mind. I delivered the load in Spokane, and the warehouse guys didn't report anything odd. Just another day. Except it wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in there with me, something that didn't belong. A month earlier, I'd heard a story from another driver, an old-timer named Hank, at a diner in Wyoming. He'd been hauling produce across Nevada when he picked up a hitchhiker, a kid, maybe 20, stranded at a gas station. Hank wasn't the type to play Good Samaritan, but the kid looked desperate, shivering in a thin jacket. Said his name was Tommy, said he was heading to Reno to find work. Hank let him ride in the cab, figuring he'd drop him at the next town. Tommy was quiet at first, but as the miles rolled by, he started talking. Said he'd been on the road for weeks, hitching rides, sleeping in ditches. Said he'd seen things, shadows that moved when they shouldn't, voices in the wind. Hank chalked it up to road fever, the kind of crazy that sets in when you're alone too long. But then Tommy got weird. Kept glancing at the trailer, asking what Hank was hauling. Just apples, Hank said, but Tommy wouldn't let it go. You sure there's nothing else back there? He asked, eyes wide. Sometimes things get in. Hank laughed it off, but the kid's words stuck. That night, parked at a rest stop, Hank heard it. A faint scratching from the trailer, like nails on wood. He checked, nothing but crates of apples, just like he'd loaded. But the scratching kept up, every night for the rest of the run. By the time he reached Reno, Tommy was gone, slipped out at a fuel stop without a word. Hank never saw him again, but he swore the trailer felt heavier after that, like he was carrying something extra. He quit hauling a year later. Some loads, he told me, they come with passengers you don't sign for. I didn't believe him then. Just a ghost story, something to pass the time over greasy eggs and burnt coffee. But now, with the knocking still echoing in my head, Hank's story didn't seem so crazy. Back on the road, I took a new load, furniture, headed for Boise. I checked the trailer twice before leaving, shining my light into every corner. Empty except for the cargo. I told myself the knocking was a one-off, a trick of the mind. But the first night, parked at a rest area, it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Same rhythm, same insistence. This time, I didn't open the trailer. I sat in the cab, crowbar in hand, staring at the darkness beyond the windshield. The knocking stopped after an hour, but I felt watched, like eyes were boring into me from the other side of the metal. I started asking around at truck stops, keeping it casual. Other drivers had stories. A guy in Idaho said he'd heard singing from his trailer, soft and wordless, coming from a load of scrap metal. A woman in Oregon swore her rig had carried a shadow, something that flickered in her mirrors, but was never there when she turned. Nobody had answers, just warnings. Don't open the trailer at night, don't talk to it, don't let it know you hear it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The knocking followed me on every run, always at night, always when I was alone. I started driving longer hours, skipping breaks, anything to avoid stopping. My logbook was a mess, my eyes bloodshot, but I couldn't rest. Not with that sound. One night, outside Missoula, I snapped. Parked in a deserted lot, the knocking started, louder, angrier, like it knew I was ignoring it. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed a tire iron and stormed to the trailer, screaming into the night. What do you want? The knocking stopped. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then from inside, a voice, low, rasping, not human, whispered, "Let me out." I dropped the tire iron and ran, locking myself in the cab. The voice didn't come again, but the knocking did, every night, growing louder, more desperate. I started seeing things in my mirrors, flickers of movement, shapes that weren't there. My hands shook on the wheel. I was falling apart. I quit hauling a month later. Sold my rig, took a job driving a city bus. No trailers, no long hauls, no nights alone. But I still hear it sometimes, in the quiet moments, a faint tap tap tap, like it's still out there waiting. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to. Some things you don't let out. Hank's story, Tommy's words, they haunt me too. Sometimes things get in. I think about that kid, out there on the road, maybe still hitching rides, maybe carrying something with him. Or maybe he was never just a kid. Maybe he was the thing that got in. I don't drive at night anymore. And I never will again.